Hi, I'm Tony Robinson. Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
So, Sir Tony Robinson, welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Very, very nice to have a chat with you for a bit.
Absolutely, and I've interviewed lots of people at night, but I've never interviewed an actual night during the day before, so this is new.
Putting chish.
I know. That's all my material's gone now. That's it. That's the lot. Thank you very much. Goodbye. So you have been acting since you were 13. I'd read your book with great interest. One thing I related to actually was because you had a bit of a tough time when you were at school in the early years. It sounded like, would you say?
Yeah.
And one thing I sort of related to was I used to get out of lessons by assisting with the school play. So I'd be in them, and I'd help with the backgrounds and all that kind of thing. And so did you always want to be an actor, or did you sort of use it as a way to get out of lessons to start with, would you say?
I loved doing it.
Yeah.
I remember I had what they used to call an elocution teacher. So elocution isn't a word you hear much nowadays, is it? And I think it was an extra £2 a term to have these elocution lessons. And she started teaching me poems. This is what I suppose I'm 8, 9, 10, something like that. And it was all the poems that were popular in those times, like Walter de la Mare and John Masefield and people who you hardly ever see written down nowadays. But they all had a great swing and a lilt to them, and they were narrative poems. And from the beginning, she taught me that poetry was essentially a very physical thing. It was about breathing, it was about your lips and your tongue and your diaphragm, and somehow the rhythm of the words was something that you transmitted physically as well as mentally, and your emotions came through with the way you used your tongue and your lips and your teeth, and I just got this straight away. And I loved doing it. I loved saying those poems and little extracts from books like Wind in the Willows. And there were various colleges in London which would do exams for kids, like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And I used to do all those, which gave me a target. And so I felt there was something special about that. I felt there was something special about being able to do that. And then when I started getting little bits in school plays, and found that I could do them, and also found that I had this thing called timing. And I've no idea what it is. To this day, I don't know what it is. I know how to do it, and I know how when I see it in other people, I know what they're doing. I know how editors cut comedy and just get the gag at the right time. But what it represents, I don't think anybody knows. But I knew I'd got it, and so I was confident on stage. So it became very, very central to my identity. And because I hated school so much, there was something about being in that world of words and song as well. I used to sing a lot, and competitions for sight reading and all that sort of thing. That became very central to me. In fact, it almost became me, I think. And then when my mum and dad read an article in the Daily Express saying that they needed some Cockney kids to be in a London show that was going to open in a few weeks' time, they said, did I want to go up to see if I could get in it? And I did, and it turned out to be the original production of the stage musical of Oliver, which was the biggest musical hit that Britain had since the war, really. I mean, there'd been lots of shows that you and I both know, like Oklahoma and Paint Your Wagon and South Pacific and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Fantastic shows, but they were all American. So suddenly, for there to be this English show with these 14 cheerful little Cockney kids in it, just touched the heart of the English audience. So suddenly I became an actor. And being a child actor, half the time at a co-ed grammar school on the borders of London, and the rest of the time doing plays in the West End and bits for the BBC and tiny little bits in movies. That to me was my real identity. That's where I felt at home. So I didn't really have much of an adolescence, which was hard in later life. But for the time being, it gave me freedom from school. And
yeah, absolutely. It must have been an incredible experience. And you worked with John Wayne in a movie?
That was later on. That was after I left drama school. When I was a child, I worked with Judy Garland.
Oh, wow.
And got to know her daughter Liza, who was just like her daughter, was just sort of hanging around the set, who had enormous contempt for me. And I was always trying to chat her up, always failed miserably. "Why are you talking to me?" she'd say. But it was formative years like very few other people have, and a big plus, but also a big minus. I didn't have the sort of adolescence that most people do.
But would you trade it now?
Well, that's one of those imponderables, isn't it? Yeah. Because I wouldn't be me. So it certainly gave me an enormous facility on the stage. It's territory that I know, and in front of camera, I know. I stuttered when I said that. Isn't that interesting? In front of camera, I know who I'm talking to, even though how can I possibly know who I'm talking to? And I've always had that, and I guess it's because I'm 71 now, and I started when I was 13, so that's a long time of occupying that territory.
Absolutely. And so, because your career is as strong as it ever was, and you're still keeping busy, do you think it's just in you? You just have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, after a very long answer, that's a one-word answer. Yeah, I just have to do it. And I think if ever I stop feeling that I have to do it, well, that's the day when retirement beckons and old age creeps in and all that. But at the moment, I don't really feel very different to how I felt when I was in my early 30s.
Yeah, I don't think you do really, do you? It's just age is literally just a number.
Yeah, I think when infirmity comes or some accident that crocks you, then you probably would start feeling different, that like you were in a different part of your life. But I just certainly don't feel that at the moment.
Fantastic. And long may it continue. So to go back a bit now, I'm just going to get it over with. I have to talk about Blackadder. I apologise. You probably get this all the time. I have to
apologise. The only thing is that because I've talked about it so much, it does tend to be the same questions and the same tropes. But why would I not want to talk about something that completely transformed my life?
Absolutely. So how did you first get the part?
Oh, it was pure luck. Yeah. The pilot script was pretty ropey. And the part of Baldry only had 8 lines, and none of them were funny. In fact, when I was sent the script, they said, do you want to play the part of Rowan Atkinson's comedy servant? I couldn't find it. I sped read it through the first time. I couldn't find it at all. It was only when I read it carefully and second time and saw a few yes sirs, no sirs. But no, it wasn't. And so loads of people had turned it down, and it was due to start on the Monday. I was offered the part on the Friday, so that shows I was not the first choice or the second or the third. Yeah. I think I was about the 8th choice. And the head of comedy at the BBC, who by some bizarre glitch of synchronicity had played Oliver in the original David Lean film of Oliver Twist. He had written me down as someone who was small and vaguely humorous. He'd seen me in some opt-out thing for BBC Southwest. And on the strength of that, he said, oh, well, let's have a look at my list. Oh, yeah, I don't know who this bloke is. Tony Robinson. Maybe he could do it. And they gave me the part. And it was extraordinary. It was a marriage made in heaven as soon as I was with those guys. They're all 10 years younger than me, but I knew that we were destined to work together. I just knew it.
It's interesting because I love the entire show, but after the first series, your character and Ren's character switched places almost.
Yeah, well, in the sense that I got cleverer and he got more stupid. That's true. That was very much down to Ben Elton. Ben said, if we want the series to have a dynamic, and the first series, he felt, although he was in some senses a big fan of it, he felt it really didn't have a narrative dynamic, something that week after week you would watch and know, yes, they're at A and they want to get to B, which is the mark, I think, of every great sitcom. He said, Rowan needs to be smart when he's surrounded by his inferiors, feel like he's the cleverest man in the world, a Renaissance prince. But then when he gets to the court, he's completely duped by the people at court, epitomised by Stephen Fry, of course. But in order for that to happen, the people in his own house had to be so stupid that they didn't realise that he wasn't stupid. So he had this veneer of brilliance in our kitchen, but was actually total crap.
It made for fantastic watching. Have you got any sort of favourite memories looking back on it now from filming?
Do you know, I really don't think of it in those terms. It was all about the work.
Yeah.
If you think about the people who made certainly Blackadder 2 to 4, they are all paranoid perfectionists. Virtually all of them had studied English or classics at university and were passionate about language, as I was, and the economy of language and the use of language. So what we used to do all the time, we were looking at the script saying, how can we make these words better? How can we make this scene better? How can we make the overarching narrative better? And it was like, I suppose in a way, I've not thought of it in this way before, it was like my real school. I was sitting down with all these bright boys trying to do something I passionately wanted to do rather than physics or geography.
That's amazing. And so the cast was incredible. There was, of course, Rowan Atkinson and Fry and Laurie, and Rick Mail was in it, and Brian Blessed. And what was it like to be with that, incredible cast?
They were all very, very strong personalities, but there was a very strong feeling of camaraderie around, and brightness. I was the only one, virtually, apart from Brian Blessed, who hadn't been to public school, and I didn't know about that very intense adolescent male competition. I'd never really experienced how, like young rutting stags, you always want to be the one with the final punchline. And if you think about so many of those gags in Blackadder, they're very baroque, aren't they? They're very complicated. They've got lots and lots of ideas in them. And that's because so many people contributed to them. Everybody wanted to have a say in how the gag would be. So if you have a punchline, that is the worst message I've ever heard since Admiral Lord Nelson flagged up at the Battle of the Nile, Lady Hamilton's a virgin, cut my arm off and poke my eye out if I'm wrong. You just know that has been written by a committee of really dazzling people. So it was actually being in Blackadder, and particularly I think being in the shadow of Richard Curtis, that taught me how to write.
That was amazing. And so you're definitely a historian yourself. You're a lover of history. Of all the things you've sort of explored since, have there ever been any sort of time periods where you thought that would be a perfect setting for Blackadder that never got explored?
So many. You could actually set Blackadder at any place, any time. Ben Elton once said, all you need to do is buy the Ladybird book of that period, which will have 6 chapters, each one of which will epitomise something about that period, and that's your episode. So yeah, there were a Wild West one. We talked about doing an Indian mutiny. One in the future. There was a 1960s one with Rowan as the bastard son of Queen Elizabeth II. A whole host of things, all of which would have been great. What Ben Elton also said was, it's very easy to write one funny episode of any period. It's actually harder to make 6 episodes where you keep the comedy level as high as you would like it.
It's really interesting. Has there ever been talk? I know you did, for the Millennium Dome all those years ago, that back and forth.
Well, we also did one which very few people know about, which was about 4 years ago, which was a reunion of Rowan and I, and Miranda Hart joined in. And the idea was that the MPs were grilling Rowan, who was a banker, about the financial collapse. And I was Rowan's gardener, who he blamed the entire financial collapse on. And we did that for the Prince's Trust at the Albert Hall, just for one night. No one knew it was going to happen. And you imagine when we walked on stage, people went absolutely bonkers. Okay. And I've only ever seen one still of it, which was actually put up on Twitter last week, I think, and then it just disappeared after about 3 days, and it said this photo is not available. So I don't know what that's all about.
So it's never been televised, it's not?
No, as far as I know. I don't know, unless anybody had got a mobile phone out during the course of it.
So moving on from Blackadder, you also hosted a TV show called Stay Tuned, which had sort of classic cartoons in it. I've got a degree in animation, as it happens. So I used to love stuff like that when I was sort of growing up.
I mean, you can understand why I wanted to write it then. It was actually the BBC who came to me and said that we've got the rights for all the Warner Brothers and MGM classic cartoons. We want to do something with them that's a bit different. Yeah. And we talked about the fact, I mean, to be quite honest, what we really wanted to do was the history, the sociology, the story of the putting together of all of these great cartoons, the Roadrunner and can't think of anybody at the moment, but you know all of them, Speedy Gonzales. And so I would do like one episode on the background music, another on sound effects, another on a great animator like Tex Avery, another one on Tom and Jerry, and we would use the clips from all these various cartoons, but it would actually be a half hour where hopefully, and it was predominantly for a young audience, hopefully people would come away from it understanding much more than about animation than they did when they came into it. And and it was a great job to do, because basically it was me and the producer Nick Frean-Jones sitting on, I think, this sofa, looking at a telly, watching cartoon after cartoon after cartoon, saying, "Oh, I really love that bit. That's got to be in." And there were a lot of radio programs at that time which used to use little snippets of comedy series, just like 10 or 15 seconds, just as punctuation marks. Yeah. And I think we were the first person that actually did the same thing visually. But sadly, eventually, the BBC lost the rights to those cartoons. Otherwise, I would still be making it today.
Yeah, because there was really nothing like it at the time.
No, I've never seen anything since that was like it either. I was always hoping that they would ask me to do something similar about sitcom or historical drama or something like that. But they never did.
If you're watching, then you should do... Yeah. Tony's ready to do this. Yeah. So another classic show that I loved as a kid is Maid Marian and Her Merry Men.
Today is the 40th anniversary since the first transmission of the first episode of Maid Marian.
Really?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Because was there 26, 28 episodes across 4 series?
Yeah, I suppose so. I can't really do it. Yeah, it was 6 4s 24 plus the Christmas special 25, yeah.
And so you wrote all of it, and you also starred as the sheriff?
That's right, yeah. I wrote all of them. One episode in the 4th series. I start again. After a while, I asked friends to start writing some storylines, because after I'd written 2 series, I thought I'm struggling a bit for storylines, and they would, I would just pay them to go away and just think about, why don't you do a Maid Marian about this, that, and the other. And 2 of the people that I got involved with were the 2 guards, Gary and Graham, who were Mark Billingham, who's become an international success as a crime writer, and Dave Lloyd, who writes Doctors now. But they were sort of quite junior writers at that time. And in a way, I felt I had the same relationship with them as I'd had with Richard Curtis 10 years previously. And they wrote with me one episode which was a parody of Crystal Maze, which turned out to be the most popular episode of all of them, which really pisses me off because it's the only one that I didn't write on my own.
It's outrageous, because it was a really funny show. I've got it on DVD. Like, I've rewatched it quite recently.
It took us a long time. It's always a problem sorting out rights for DVDs. Yeah. There's a lot of my series that people ask for on DVD, and I really struggle to get them on. And of course, for just quite honestly, from a narcissistic point of view, you want your work still to be out there, and also because a lot of my children's work is. The fans for it were people who now have their own children, so I want them to have it so they can pass the baton on to their children, but it isn't always easy. So yeah, I was really pleased when the Marian DVDs finally happened.
It was so much fun because it was also this classic mythology sort of turned on its head. Maid Marian was the hero and Robin Hood wasn't at all. And was that sort of the first spark of the idea for that show?
Yes, in a sense. I had been doing a lot of work on mythology over the previous few years, including at the National Theatre, doing the Oresteia, which is the story of Orestes and Clytemnestra and Agamemnon coming back from the Trojan War. I'd done a series on some of the Old Testament myths, on some of the Greek myths. And I was fascinated by really something that you've just said. You said you turned the myth of Robin Hood on its head. I think that's what keeps myth surviving. It always changes with the different generations. And that's happened since Roman times onwards. That you've got all these characters, these stock characters, and you can make them say whatever you want them to say about your own time. And that's really what I wanted to do with Robin Hood. I forgot what your question was now.
So have I. Why are we sat here? I don't know. How did I get here? I don't know. Well, there's the painting of you, so you're clearly somebody. There's no paintings of me outrageously. Oh, there's a pair over there. That could be me. So yeah, I interviewed Danny John Jules a few days ago as well, which was sort of nice seeing you both in a week actually. So moving on again, another classic show that you were of course heavily involved with, Time Team, which went on for 20 years. I know.
I mean, we never ever, when it first started, thought there could ever be more than a handful of episodes, because we didn't believe there was that much different sort of archaeology, different sorts of environments. It was only really when we started doing it that we realised, well, there's a host of different periods, there's a host of different sorts of archaeology, huge number of different sorts of landscapes, lots of academics with very, very different skills. And although originally we only did 4 a year, we eventually spread to 13, and it wasn't a stretch at all. And in addition to the 13, we used to make 4 Time Team documentaries a year, and I would do 4 history documentaries on top of that. So what started as one little pilot turned out to dominate my life for the best part of 20 years.
It's a good thing about history, there's just so much of it.
There is quite a lot, isn't it? Yeah. I did a gig last night about the history of Windsor Castle, and I went to St George's Chapel in Windsor with a friend of mine who is a great historian, and Jonathan Foyle, who actually was one of the academics on Time Team sometimes, and we just talked and talked and talked, and the audience was only supposed to be there for an hour, and after an hour and 3/4 I forgot to look at my watch, and I suddenly went, shit, you've probably all got trains to catch. Go now if you want to. If you want to stay, we'll do half an hour of questions. And nobody got up and left, and it wasn't because we were particularly charismatic, although of course we were.
You are, yeah.
But it's just because there was so much really interesting history attached to Windsor Castle that everybody wanted to know it.
It's incredible. And of course you also did live episodes. Did anything ever go wrong?
Time Team. Oh, all the time. But the great thing about a live show is that it goes wrong. When it goes wrong, everyone knows that it's real, whereas it just doesn't have that polished, shaped feel that normal programs have. But on the other hand, you feel as a viewer that you're getting down and dirty with the archaeologists.
And so next up is the worst jobs in history, of which there are 2 series of. What do you consider to be the worst job in history, and what was yours?
The worst job in history is being the person who makes a series called The Worst Jobs in History, because you have to do them all. Whereas at least the people who did one of those jobs, presumably they developed some kind of skill to do it, which I never had. Secondly, they developed the muscles in order to do it, which I never had. And presumably weren't prey to all the bacteria, which particularly on the nasty jobs assailed me day after day. I was so ill after having made each series of worst jobs. It was definitely the most grueling thing I've ever done, because it was so remorseless day after day. I had to be passionately interested in wading through another form of shite or climbing to the top of the most hideously tall place in the world. So yeah, I was always surprised that Channel 4 never made any more. I suppose it's because Channel 4 has always liked to see itself as the programme of freshness and innovation. It walked away from them after 2 series, but I thought there was still plenty of legs in it, although I think my body was quite relieved I didn't do any more.
Were you ever halfway through your filming and thinking, why didn't I do the best jobs in history?
Yes. Oh, of course. Yeah. No one ever gives me that kind of thing. There are other people. Richard E. Grant gets like the best hotels in the world. Duh! Why don't they give that to me? Give him something shitty.
Exactly. Yeah. So, how did it feel when you found out you were going to be knighted?
That was so weird. I didn't know. I thought people do tend to drop hints. That something is going to happen and we think that you will be quite pleased by it. And so I thought there was a chance that I would get an honour, but I had no idea what it would be. And when it turned out to be a K, blimey O'Reilly, I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? And I can remember thinking at the time, I will never not be able to think about this. It is just so big in my life. It will just always be there. But just like anything else, you just forget about it after a bit. Yes, somebody yesterday evening in the audience referred to me as Sir Tony. You've just said, what was it like? Probably it's been a fortnight since I've even thought about it prior to that. But it is a lovely thing to have happened. I mean, for a bunch of people to be in a room and say, we want to honour those people who've done service to the nation. Oh, we'll give one to Tone. I feel just great.
It's an incredible thing, but your career is definitely testament to the amazing, the work that you've done.
That's very nice of you to say so. I realistically, I think it was as much about the charitable stuff, the developmental world stuff, and the hard-nosed political stuff that I've done throughout my life.
Well, absolutely. I mean, all of it. You've made a huge contribution, not only in entertainment, but just to society.
Oh, well, a little bit.
A bit. More than me.
Yeah.
So far. This afternoon, I'm going to really
change the world.
Yeah, I'm going to really do that, yeah. I'm going to work it out on the tube. So we must talk about this too. You've written a great many children's books, but you've also got an autobiography out, which is now in paperback as well.
It is indeed, yes. It's called No Cunning Plan.
How did you come up with that title?
I don't know. It was just purely arbitrary.
Random words.
Yeah, I've obviously it was shameless promotion and identification, but also I wanted to say, because people always think that freelancers in some miraculous way have planned their lives, and you can't, can you? You can try and make the best of the opportunities which you find available to you, and when you get to the level in your career that I'm lucky enough to get to, then occasionally you can say, this is what I want to do, and someone will say, all right, we'll finance it. But by and large, you're at other people's behest. And I just wanted to explain to people how that happens, how you do get turned down for things on so many occasions. I mean, having read the book, you'll know there must have been about 10 occasions where I got a job where I thought, this could absolutely transform my life, and it didn't. And then Blackadder happens, this could absolutely transform my life, and it did. Who'd have known?
Do you ever think if I'd given up at that point, when something goes wrong, you would have missed out on all of this stuff?
I think one thing that I've always had, I've always had the muscles of a stayer. There's something about being little, apart from anything else. I would never be bullied. I would never, ever be bullied. Isn't it funny how I had to say that twice? I've always been hurt very easily, but A, I will never show it, and B, I will pick myself up after 2 or 3 days and carry on, and that has stood me in such good stead being an actor, because I know being an actor is not like it's not like being in Syria, is it? But
unless you act in Syria,
unless you do, in a theatre and education company, but you do need to be robust, and I think it was Anne Bancroft who said survival is she was asked what characterises success in Hollywood, and she said 90% survival, 10% talent, and I think that's probably about the right sum.
And do you obviously with the internet and stuff like that, everyone's so easily accessible, do you sort of read reviews of things, or just get on with doing the shows and have them speak for themselves?
I don't never read reviews. I think it's hard because how could you not want to know what's out there?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it can be so painful. But particularly on virtual media. I mean, well, I seldom get reviewed on virtual media. But the things that people feel they're allowed to say on virtual media, and indeed are the kind of things that they wouldn't say in, as it were, real life. Yeah. And so many times someone has said on Twitter, for instance, where I'm fairly habitual, has said something really pretty shit. But then when if you come back to them in a reasonably gentle and courteous spirit, they back down. They won't back down from their opinion, but they'll certainly back down by and large on the way they've said it. It's a funny. We're having to gear up to a very different and new series of ways of communicating with each other as a species.
That's it, because I think when people are hiding behind a keyboard almost anonymously, it's easier for them just to say anything, and they might have only given it 2 seconds thought while they're eating their dinner and then gone about their life, but it can really affect other people. So I think you sort of need to think about that and not say things to people that you wouldn't say to their face.
No, that's right. I had a friend who went through quite a difficult period in their life about a fortnight ago, which was reported in the Daily Mail, and I looked at the comments that had come in online, and I despaired of my species. And it was someone that I knew so well, and knew that the way they were being represented by these comments was that he's just a bloke. He's just a bloke. Come on. But whether we'll just become inured to it, or whether after a while a courtesy will descend online, who's to know?
Let's hope so, because let's just hope people get nicer. Be nice to everybody. Public service announcement.
Yeah, I mean, be rigorous. And there are witty and wonderful ways to put down somebody else's opinion. But that's saying something just deliberately to be horrid. I've spoken out at length recently about the attacks by some Brexiteers on those people who wanted to stay in Europe, and it's shameful. And the problem about it is that I think it contributes to such a bad feeling within society generally that it doesn't do their argument any good, but it also doesn't do the nation any good. And out of patriotism, I think at this time in particular, we need to find vocabularies where we can hold together, even though we might have very different political opinions.
Absolutely. Because that's the thing, we need to look for what unites us rather than what separates us all the time. And everyone, be it they come from a different town or they support a different sports team, and everyone just sort of separates each other, whereas you should go, this is what makes us the same.
So I couldn't agree more.
Because we're all stuck on the same planet until we invest more in space.
Yes.
And we could just go off onto different planets and it won't matter.
And when we can mess them up instead of our own home one, and we can mess them up and then run away again, which is what we'll probably do.
It'll just be full of Starbucks. But it's space bucks.
Do I like the idea of space bucks, or is it so disgusting that I can't? Let's move on.
Absolutely, yeah. Horrible. Next, so you quite recently, returned to comedy again with Man Down. 6 episodes of that.
I did, yeah.
And you gave Greg Davis's character quite a hard time.
That was wonderful, yes, yeah. It was great. Lovely working with Greg. He is the closest that we've got now to Rick Mayall, I think.
Yes.
And of course he invited Rick Mayall to be in his first.
His dad.
Yeah. And he's like a kind of mature version of Rick in a way. I don't think he has that self-destructive energy which Rick had so often. And he doesn't there isn't quite such an edge to his anarchy. But really, seeing the two of them together, it was almost like dad and child.
It's incredible because you can just sort of see him in him somehow, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And next, I want to move on to.
You say I'm in 6 episodes of Man Down. Correct? You don't know. You just don't know.
Ooh.
That's all I'm going to say.
So you might return.
That's all I'm going to say.
But so to date.
That's all I'm going to say.
Have you been playing Greg Davis the whole time?
Yes, I have a big Greg Davis suit.
This is incredible.
That's the story today, folks. It wasn't Greg. Greg died 18 months ago. I've been operating that suit ever since.
You're brilliant on Taskmaster.
Thank you.
I anticipated this is where the interview would go. Next, I'd love to talk about Coast to Coast, which is a series I really enjoyed. Did you? Let me see. Did you actually walk the 192 miles of that, or did you stop at certain places?
Stopped at certain places. In fact, I didn't shoot it in one go. I couldn't, because I'd got lots of other shows that I actually had responsibility to finish, apart from anything else. And so I would do a third of it and then go away and shoot something else and then come back and do. But also, the truth is, I didn't walk every single mile of it, because you'd get it I can remember there was about 7 miles of it where you're crossing the M6, where there wasn't anything that we wanted to talk about or film. So I couldn't keep the crew hanging around while I walked 7 miles in order that I could be as pure as snow in doing the walking. But having said that, then at the end of the 7 miles, we started filming. I would have to walk halfway up a mountain and come back, then go back again to do the tight shot. Then, because I'm talking to a historian, I would have to do it twice more in order to do my reverse and his or her reverse. So I ended up, I probably didn't do 180 miles, but I would have done well over 150. So when you see me exhausted, it's not me going, oh gosh, it's so tiring doing this walk. That was kosher.
So you didn't do the entire walk, but you did some bits of it several times, which I think counts.
I think it should, don't you?
And it's really interesting too, because you did like stuff that you wouldn't normally see in a show, like learning how to make a Scotch egg and just how they break slate like so cleanly. So it's interesting watching that.
Well, I was very keen that we should do a series that wasn't some bloke off the telly walking along talking about history. I'd just seen so many of those, and indeed had conspired to be in so many.
Been in a couple,
just a few. I really wanted to do something about people in the landscape, and particularly at this time in our nation's history, wanted to do something about how people make a living in not a wealthy part of Britain, which is where the wonderful, glorious entrepreneur who made 146 different kinds of Scotch eggs came in, and people who have their own microbrewery, and people who train sheepdogs, that kind of thing. And all of them had other jobs as well. Because that's the only way that they could survive, and I think that's really worth celebrating. And they're all smart. It's like, when you say he's got 9 jobs, then there's part of you that might think, oh, they're probably pretty stupid. That clean out something here and then go and polish something over there. But these are people with a wonderful training quite often, and a great perception, and very interesting people, and their way of surviving is to do a variety of different things.
Absolutely. It's a really good show. If you've not seen it, it's still available on demand as well, so I highly recommend it. So you're very vocal, you're a Labour member, supporter as well. So how do you sort of think the party's doing at the minute? We've got Jeremy Corbyn in charge. Think we're doing okay?
It is difficult, and it's a difficult time even to talk about it. Apart from anything else, nobody really knows where we are. How is Jeremy doing? Nobody knows. I mean, according to the polls, he was until last week a couple of percent above Theresa May, and now they're level pegging. But we don't know how that's going to reflect in the country. None of the pollsters got it right last time.
Well, they're way off, yeah.
And so it could be that Jeremy is doing fantastically well and would get an overall majority. Or maybe the polls have got it wrong in the other direction, and people will go, oh yeah, the Tories are crap, but actually we're safer with them than we are with Jeremy. So it's I think all we can do at the moment is press for the things that we care about. And I am fiercely, although I hope courteously, against us leaving the European Union, and that in many senses is actually a bipartisan position. That's not about just being Labour or just being Lib Dem or Tory. If something like that were to be delivered, it would have to be because lots of people with different perspectives held onto it. Same really with things like funding the NHS, or more particularly in how we get our social services working. You really do, however much people might care about their own political party, you're going to need something of a bipartisan approach at local level, even if it's not at political level. I hate Theresa May, I hate Liam Fox. Well, maybe you do, but if you're going to get the National Health Service working locally, then you're going to need an awful lot of people from other parties or who care about other parties to deliver it for you. So there's no point in just sort of, fencing your own political position off. You can have your own political position. I have mine passionately, but I think we're not in the kind of time where we can wallow in the luxury of hating everybody else who doesn't share our own position.
Absolutely, very well said. And can you tell me what you're working on at the moment or working on next? From being Greg Davis full-time?
Yeah, I can't because it's a secret. What I'm doing in the next room to here, and what I will start doing again in about 5 minutes, all I can tell you is that it's something to do with Terry Pratchett, and that is all I can tell you. I'm sorry to be so coy about these things. The other thing that I will be doing is preparing for something which may well be the next Coast to Coast for me. But once again, until I've signed the doodah, I can't really tell you.
North to South would be a lot longer.
It would indeed. Yeah.
Let's get a train. It's probably quicker to walk sometimes.
Oh, yeah, than getting that train. Yeah. Oh, goodness me, yes. Yeah, crawl.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you've done a lot of Terry Pratchett stuff, haven't you? You've done audiobooks, and I think you contributed to a video game and TV show kind of stuff. Yeah,
and I was in one of those, the Sky shows based on one of Terry Pratchett's books, The Hogfather. Yeah, I've actually put all of the Discworld, virtually all of Terry's work, onto audio, and all of them I think are out there now. Occasionally I might get a voice wrong. A very small character who was in book 3 might turn up again in book 27, and then I'll get very angry letters from passionate Pratchetteers.
You've done that one.
Yeah. Whoops.
Sorry. There's a lot of characters and things, so it must be incredibly hard.
Reading them, it is like that, one of those things where you're juggling balls and patting your head and writing Hamlet at the same time. It's because the voices of the characters just come zoom, 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 and getting the gags right and the timing right and the pitch right and everything. Yeah,
absolutely. And finally, have you got any messages for people watching the Sarah O'Connell show, and of course your fans all around the world?
Not really, other than thank you for following my work for so long. I think the most flattering thing that happens to me nowadays is when people come up and say, I like your work, rather than I like the Adder, or I like the Pratchett books, or I like Maid Marian, or whatever. To like your work means that they get that you've got a body of work, and it is the thing, apart from my family, that's the thing that I care about most in the world. So thank you for liking my work.
There's so much to like. I think it's like researching for this interview. It's like, where do I start? I have to talk about all of it because it's all brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you really for doing it.
No, thank you. Don't cup of tea.
Love a cup of tea. Okay. I need to see what's happening in that other room. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Be sure to share, subscribe, give the video a big thumbs up, and I'll see you all again soon for another episode of the Sarah O'Connell Show.
And buy my autobiography, No Canning Plan.
I already have.
Oh.
I've got the audiobook as well, because you sing in that instantly.
I did. Yeah.
I really have listened to it.
And I'm going to sing on the telly before Christmas for ITV. Yeah.
I'm going to sing near the telly with ITV on near Christmas.
You'll probably be better than me.
I don't know. It'd be better in the fact that no one can hear me do it, so except my neighbours. So sorry for that. I can't help it. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you again, Sir Tony, for being on the Sarah O'Connell Show. Bye.
Bye. I have a really cunning plan to subscribe to the Sarah O'Connell Show. She made me say that.
It's very true. Thank you.